by this point in the class, you should have a pretty good idea of what platforms you're going to be focusing on in terms of your organic efforts. But I did also want to talk about how you can sort of amplify the success of your organic efforts through some other methods like collaborations and paid ads and brand ambassadors and maybe even PR opportunities. So whether or not one of these or all of these are right for you and your business is entirely dependent on your unique situation, your budget, your audience, and your overall strategy and what you're hoping to achieve. But I just think it's important to talk about the fact that social media doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think it's important for us to talk about how other areas of marketing and business can kind of fit into your social media strategy and hopefully help to amplify as well. Now, if right now you're sitting there thinking, okay, these are things that are way outside of what is possible with my budget and resources, I just want you to keep an open mind, because just because maybe these are not areas that you and your team are responsible for right this second, and maybe it's not something you're hoping to pursue yet, doesn't mean that there's not value to be gained here from something that you might explore down the line. So I just want you to keep an open mind as we go into this discussion, because you might still get a lot of value out of it, even if it's not something you're hoping to kind of implement straight away. So it's important to first talk about engagement and the sort of differentiation between social media platforms that really require engagement from you and your team versus others that probably care a little bit more about how your audience is actually engaging with your content. And really the two main platforms that will sit on the latter part of this are YouTube and Pinterest. So these are intent-heavy search engine-based platforms that essentially just track how people are engaging with your content that is popping up in their search results, and whether or not it's providing them with value, and whether it's showing up for the right search terms and all those sorts of things. And then they decide whether to show it to other people who are searching for similar things. So that means that regardless of whether or not you spend time on these platforms like YouTube and Pinterest, although it definitely helps, your success will be a lot more determined by how well your content is actually optimized for clickability, relatability to the search terms, and in terms of YouTube, the actual time people are spending watching that video. Are they liking it? Are they commenting on it? Are they engaging with it? All those sorts of things are really going to play into whether or not your content is actually successful on those platforms. Whereas for platforms like Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and even Facebook to an extent, really care about how you're engaging with your audience on these platforms a lot more than YouTube and Pinterest. So what that means is that these platforms will actually push your content out to more people if you are engaging with the content and with your community on these platforms. And that is specifically the case for Instagram, where your content is going to get pushed out to people you engage with the most and that you provide personal one-on-one value to. And so your interaction with your audience has a lot to do with this on these platforms. But regardless of the platform, active community engagement can be such a powerful strategy to help not only amplify your content, but really get to know your audience and maybe even gain inspiration for future social campaigns. So be prepared to allocate a little bit of time and resources to community engagement in order to see real success on these platforms. That could be done through getting your audience to ask you questions and then you answer them in your stories or through your posts, or you could ask them questions, and that can really help you understand what they're struggling with and what they want to see more of from you. Finally, you can also take people behind the scenes of your business and make them feel really involved. If there's anything to be learned from watching the show How It's Made, or practically any video on TikTok, it's that as humans, we love knowing how things work behind the scenes. So don't be afraid to involve people in this. Next, let's talk about brand collaborations. Probably one of my favorite companies in terms of how they handle their brand collaborations is Airbnb, who has partnered with everyone from Barbie to the Olympics to create incredible campaigns. So let's have a look at some of them, and it might just help you gain some ideas for how you could leverage something like this for your own business. So I've linked you guys to this in your class guide, but they have an entire page just dedicated to all of their amazing brand partnerships. But the ones that I really, really love are Barbie, because they basically did this to celebrate Barbie's 60th anniversary, where they made Barbie's Malibu dream house, which was epic. So make sure to go and check out the link if you want to see how they went about this. And obviously it was just to drive awareness to the amazing creative Airbnbs that you can actually rent out and also celebrate Barbie. But the campaign I wanted to look at a little bit more closely with you is their night at the Louvre, which was a collaboration they did, and the marketing agency that was responsible for the execution was called We Are Amplify. So they actually have stats on exactly what the challenge was, what their strategy was, their solution, and then also their results. So as you go through this, you'll notice that this is something they put together to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Louvre Pyramid. And naturally, you wouldn't think that a museum and Airbnb would be a good natural sort of collaboration, but it worked really, really well. It was essentially them advertising a temporary structure, which was going to be a mini pyramid that was built inside of the world famous Louvre pyramid, where you could essentially have the Louvre to yourself for the night. And if any of you guys have been to the Louvre, you'll know that having the Mona Lisa room to yourself like this is very, very unique, and you don't have to be surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of tourists. So it was a really, really cool campaign, and they had all of these amazing stats to back it up as well. They had 471 Snapchat swipe ups, 182,000 competition entries, 56,000 likes on Instagram, 1.5 million website hits, and 5.9 million YouTube video completions. So it was obviously a really big success in terms of this collaboration. So I would encourage you to think about how you might be able to seek out similar collaborations with brands who can help you to really amplify your organic or even paid social media strategy. And along the same lines, let's now talk about brand ambassadors. So I'm a big fan of thinking outside the box, and I know that a lot of companies still don't necessarily consider influencers as a worthwhile investment to their marketing strategy. So I'm going to be using the term brand ambassador here instead, because I think it's a little bit more all-encompassing. And with brand ambassadors, of course, there is the obvious amplification strategies with utilizing people who are existing customers. They already know, love, and trust your product or service and are happy to promote it to their audience for a set fee or a percentage of sales or a discount on their ongoing service fee with your company. And of course, ideally assuming that their audience is also very closely aligned with your target audience. But for some industries and some businesses, this just doesn't seem feasible because maybe they want to retain control over any marketing assets that promote their brand, or maybe their customers just don't have the social media audiences to leverage this kind of strategy. And for this reason, I also wanted to give you 2 examples of how you still might be able to leverage the power of brand ambassadors in a bit of a different way. So firstly, I've got this example from Hello Social, and again, check that on your class guide, but essentially it's a method of hosting an event for people in your industry where you can promote this to your audience or to their audience by targeting off of their brand through paid efforts. But it means that they're not actually responsible for creating anything. You retain ownership over creating all the assets. So these guys obviously had videographers and production teams on hand at the event that could do these kind of mini interviews with experts or industry leaders. And it still kind of counts as user-generated content and leveraging their authority, but in a bit of a different way. So make sure to check out the full video if this is something you can see leveraging for your business. Now, the other strategy that I love is actually a Skillshare strategy that you probably might have even seen already, which is to essentially create all the assets for the brand ambassador, but then they advertise it through their own accounts. JVN from Queer Eye for the Straight Guy is an example of how Skillshare has done this with his new Skillshare original class, which was completely created and produced by the Skillshare team. And then these marketing assets and these videos were also created by the Skillshare team, as was probably the copy around it or anything like that. But then the ads are actually running from Jonathan's account. And another example of this is from Lily Singh, who is a comedian and a YouTuber and a video content creator who has a Skillshare original. So Skillshare was able to supply the marketing materials for her to then advertise through her accounts, which is great because her audience already knows, likes, and trusts her. So if she's promoting Skillshare to her audience in this way, it's a lot more powerful than Skillshare themselves promoting these videos through their account, because it may or may not reach Lily's audience. But if she's going to be promoting it through her accounts, then it absolutely will reach her audience. But they still get to retain the ownership over how the brand is presented through these video assets. And next, let's talk about press and media opportunities. So even if you maybe don't have the budget to outsource PR to an agency or have internal resources to allocate team members to this task full time, it still might be worthwhile for you to just make a list of industry publications, podcasts, YouTube channels, TV networks, or any other form of media that's relevant to your industry, and maybe just see where you might be able to add value to their audience through the lens of your particular expertise. Now, pitching for guest features is really only as complicated as you make it out to be. Of course, the bigger the media source and the more popular, the harder it's going to be to get in there. But if you can get a few smaller sources to really feature your story, it will be much easier to then use these as leverage for the bigger guys. And finally, let's talk about paid ads as a way to amplify your organic content. So likely you have weaved paid socials into your strategy by this point, especially if lead generation or direct sales of your products are a big part of your overall goals. But I did want to just include it here as well as a strategy for amplifying your organic efforts. Because some of you might still very much be thinking about social media strategy on an organic level only, because maybe the idea of paid ads in your head means needing thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of additional budget that you might not have. And that's totally fine. It really has to be right for you and your unique business. But I would really encourage you to, at the very least, just explore paid ads as they pertain to your already well-performing organic content. So setting up a paid Facebook or Instagram ad campaign, for example, to just essentially expand the reach of your posts is relatively simple, and it can make a big impact. Because remember that only a very small percentage of your audience actually get to see your content, even if they're actively following you. So even if you're just putting a little bit of budget behind your organic posts and your videos and showing them to your existing audience on socials, that can still be a really worthwhile effort that can bring a lot of value to your overall strategy. All right, guys, so I hope you found that helpful. And now in the next lesson, we'll really start piecing all of this together in a cohesive strategy document. So I can't wait to see you there.